There is an old truth whispered across generations. The more you push something away, the more power you give it to stay. The first step toward true freedom is awareness. Most of us spend our lives running from what feels uncomfortable. We push away sadness, deny anger, or suppress fear, thinking that avoidance will make these feelings vanish. Yet the very act of avoidance strengthens them. When we refuse to acknowledge what is present inside us, it does not disappear. It hides in the corners of our mind and body, quietly shaping our thoughts, our decisions, and even our relationships. Anger that is ignored seeps into our words, in subtle ways, sometimes in a sharp tone, sometimes in a quiet resentment that lingers like a shadow over our interactions. Fear left unexamined grows in the dark, whispering what-ifs and creating barriers we cannot see, and sadness that is resisted festers, coloring our perception of life with a heaviness we may not even realize. Awareness begins with the courage to pause, to observe what is happening within without judgment. It means looking at the emotion or thought not as a problem to be fixed, but as a signal, a guide pointing towards something that needs attention. Imagine an inner dialogue that shifts from "I must get rid of this" to "I see you and I will understand you." That shift, small as it may seem, changes the energy entirely. The very act of seeing, acknowledging, and naming what arises begins to dissolve its power over us. We often resist because we fear the intensity of what we feel. We tell ourselves, if I let myself feel this, I might break, or this is too much to handle. Yet the opposite is true. What we resist grows stronger precisely because we refuse to meet it fully. Awareness is the first moment of liberation. It does not ask us to act, to change, or to fix anything immediately. It only asks us to be present, to sit with the discomfort, to allow it to exist without trying to escape. Over time, this presence builds a quiet confidence that no emotion is permanent, no thought is unmanageable, and no sensation is beyond understanding. Even when the mind screams to look away, even when the body tenses to flee, awareness calls for stillness. It teaches that true insight is not found in avoidance, but in observation. Each time we face what we have been hiding from, we weaken its hold. Each time we breathe into the tension instead of resisting it, we reclaim a little more of our inner freedom. In this way, awareness is not merely a practice, it is a revolution of the self, a gentle yet unwavering recognition that running from life is a path that always circles back. Only when we see clearly what we have been avoiding can we begin to move with clarity, courage, and true understanding. The energy we give to our thoughts, emotions, and experiences is far more powerful than most of us realize. Every time we resist something, we inadvertently feed it, because resistance itself requires energy. When we focus on what we do not want, whether it is a fear, a mistake, a pain, or a person, we pour our attention into it, and attention is energy. It does not matter that our intention is to escape or reject. We are still creating a connection, a link between ourselves and the very thing we wish would disappear. Imagine staring at a fire while trying to push it away with your hands. The harder you push, the hotter it feels, the more energy it demands, and the more it burns. The moment you direct your attention elsewhere, when you step back and observe without attachment, the fire does not disappear immediately, but its hold over you begins to loosen. This principle is subtle, yet profound. The mind is a garden, and attention is the water we pour into it. When we resist, we may think we are pulling weeds, but often we are watering them instead. Every anxious thought, every imagined catastrophe, every judgment of another person or even ourselves receives strength from the very focus we try to use against it. The mind does not discriminate between positive and negative attention. It simply grows what we feed. Therefore, to focus on resistance is to nourish it. To dwell on fear is to make it larger. To obsess over what we do not want is to draw it closer, like a magnet pulled by our own insistence. We can see this in daily life in ways both obvious and hidden. Consider anger toward another person. When we replay their words, their actions, their perceived injustices over and over in our minds, we are not diminishing them, we are feeding them. Every thought we give to that anger strengthens its presence in our mind, our body, and our decisions. The same is true of fear. The more we try to push it away, the more it dominates our thinking. Even small anxieties, when given repeated attention, grow roots in our consciousness. Over time, these patterns of resistance become habits, and we find ourselves bound to the very states we long to escape. The solution is not to deny the presence of what troubles us, but to shift the focus of our attention consciously. Instead of feeding the unwanted, we observe it, acknowledge it, and then redirect energy toward what nourishes understanding, clarity, and growth. This does not mean pretending the issue does not exist. It means refusing to let resistance alone dictate the flow of our energy. Just as a river can be redirected to irrigate fields, our attention can be guided to support insight and freedom rather than bondage. The key is conscious awareness of where our energy is going. We can ask ourselves at any moment, am I feeding resistance or am I nurturing understanding? This principle extends beyond the personal into the way we engage with the world. Society, relationships, and even work are mirrors of this truth. When we focus on resentment toward others, on judgment, or on frustration over circumstances, we empower those very patterns. But when we focus on understanding, compassion, and mindful action, we cultivate a field of energy that produces clarity, solutions, and peace. Energy flows exactly where attention goes, and thus our inner world is a reflection of where we habitually place that attention. It is important to remember that this practice is not about forcing positivity or suppressing natural feelings. It is about conscious allocation of energy. We do not pretend anger does not exist. We do not deny fear or grief. Instead, we meet them, acknowledge them, and intentionally choose where our focus goes next. This allows us to stop inadvertently strengthening the very patterns we wish to dissolve. Attention becomes a tool, a compass, a gentle hand guiding our inner life rather than a leash pulling us back into struggle. The more we practice directing attention away from resistance, the more subtle and natural it becomes. Life begins to feel lighter, not because challenges vanish, but because our energy is no longer trapped in the endless cycle of pushing and pulling. The things that once consumed us lose their grip, not through force, but through the conscious choice to redirect attention. This awareness, repeated moment by moment, gradually transforms the inner landscape, creating space for clarity, peace, and genuine freedom to emerge. Energy flows where attention goes. This is a simple law, yet one of the most profound truths of life. The more we understand it, the more we see that resistance, when fueled by focus, only grows stronger. By learning to observe, to choose where attention is placed, and to redirect energy toward awareness and understanding, we begin to break the chains of what we resist, and slowly, subtly, the power of that resistance begins to dissolve. Acceptance is often misunderstood. Many believe that to accept a situation, a feeling, or a thought is to give up, to surrender, or to allow oneself to be defeated. But true acceptance is not resignation. It is not weakness. It is a conscious recognition of reality as it is, without adding layers of judgment, denial, or resistance. Acceptance is a deep understanding that life unfolds in ways beyond our control, and that every experience, whether pleasant or painful, contains a lesson or message that cannot be ignored. When we confuse acceptance with surrender, we bind ourselves to a cycle of avoidance, thinking that fighting and resisting is the only path to freedom, when in truth the very act of resisting keeps us trapped. To accept is to open the eyes of the mind and the heart fully to the present moment. It is to stop struggling against what is already happening, whether that is an emotion, a circumstance, or a thought. Imagine trying to hold back a river with your bare hands, forcing the water to stop its flow. You strain, you tire, you may even hurt yourself, but the river continues. Acceptance, in contrast, is like stepping into the river, feeling the current, and learning to navigate it with awareness and skill. When we stop using force against life, when we stop insisting that reality must be different from what it is, a clarity emerges that allows us to see what truly requires action and what only requires observation. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It does not mean we stop seeking solutions or striving for improvement. Rather, it allows action to arise from clarity instead of reaction. When we resist, we are driven by fear, by frustration, by the desire to eliminate discomfort. Actions born from resistance are often hurried, misguided, or heavy with tension. When we accept, we act from a place of understanding, a place of calm presence. Our decisions become more precise, our words more measured, and our movements more effective. There is a power in acceptance because it aligns energy with reality instead of fighting against it. This principle applies to our inner experiences. First, anger, fear, sadness, grief, or shame do not disappear simply because we refuse to feel them. In fact, resisting them often makes them stronger. When we allow these emotions to exist, when we acknowledge their presence without judgment, we create space for them to move, transform, and eventually release. Anger that is accepted can become a teacher, revealing boundaries that have been crossed or values that have been ignored. Fear that is accepted can become a guide, showing where growth or caution is needed. Sadness that is met with awareness can lead to insight, empathy, and depths of understanding. Acceptance is also a radical practice in the face of uncertainty. Life rarely unfolds according to our expectations. People change, circumstances shift, and the world moves in ways beyond our control. When we resist uncertainty, we exhaust ourselves trying to predict, control, or manipulate what cannot be controlled. Acceptance allows us to move with life rather than against it. It does not remove the unpredictability, but it changes our relationship with it. The mind no longer struggles endlessly against what is happening. Instead, it observes, adapts, and responds with wisdom rather than panic. Even our sense of self benefits from acceptance. We resist parts of ourselves that we find uncomfortable, flaws, mistakes, or insecurities, thinking that ignoring or suppressing them will make us whole. Yet acceptance reveals that wholeness is not about perfection, but about the integration of all parts of who we are. By seeing ourselves clearly, without condemnation, we gain the power to transform gently rather than through force. What we acknowledge we can work with, what we resist we remain trapped in. Acceptance is a practice that requires patience, courage, and repeated effort. It is not always easy to face what we have been avoiding, to recognize what we have been fighting, or to embrace what feels uncomfortable. But each act of acceptance builds a foundation of inner strength, clarity, and peace. It teaches that true freedom is not the elimination of challenges, but the mastery of our response to them. It reminds us that surrender is not found in yielding, but in the conscious choice to meet reality fully, and that in this meeting, power, insight, and transformation arise naturally. Resistance is often a mental loop that keeps us bound to the past or lost in the future, preventing us from fully inhabiting the present moment. When we insist that life should be different from what it is, we create a tension that stretches across time. We dwell on what has already happened, replaying events and conversations in our minds, or we worry incessantly about what might come, imagining all the ways things could go wrong. In both cases, the present, the only reality we can ever truly experience, slips through our fingers, and with it, our power to act wisely and effectively. The mind becomes a battlefield where the past and future are used as weapons against our peace, and we find ourselves exhausted, anxious, and unfulfilled. Clinging to the past is one of the most common forms of resistance. When a mistake is made, an injustice occurs, or a relationship falters, the mind replays every detail over and over, searching for answers, searching for fairness, searching for closure. Yet this repetition rarely leads to resolution. Instead, it strengthens the emotional charge, keeping us tethered to events that cannot be changed. Holding on to resentment, regret, or sorrow about what has happened does not correct the past. It ensures that we carry its weight indefinitely. The memory becomes a prison, and every thought of it reinforces the chains we have wrapped around ourselves. By resisting the past, by wishing it were different or lamenting its unfairness, we make ourselves prisoners of time, unable to move freely in the moment. Resistance also manifests as anxiety about the future. We imagine outcomes, forecast disasters, and prepare ourselves for situations that may never occur. This mental rehearsal of fear consumes energy and attention that could be used in the present. It convinces us that control is possible when it is not, and it distracts us from the choices we can actually make right now. Ironically, the more we try to resist uncertainty, the more anxious we become, as if resistance itself were a magnet drawing forward the very fears we hope to avoid. Anxiety about the future and resentment of the past are two sides of the same coin. Both stem from a refusal to accept the present, and both drain the mind of the clarity and calm needed to live fully. The present moment, though simple in concept, is often difficult to inhabit because it requires letting go of these forms of resistance. To truly live now, we must relinquish attachment to what has already occurred and stop obsessing over what may happen. This does not mean ignoring lessons from the past or neglecting prudent preparation for the future. It means not letting them dominate our attention or dictate our emotional state. By stepping fully into the present, we allow ourselves to respond to life as it unfolds rather than reacting to imagined scenarios or replayed memories. In this space, choice and freedom emerge naturally, and the energy previously trapped in resistance is released for creativity, compassion, and clarity. Resistance also distorts perception. When the mind is stuck in time, events and experiences are filtered through past grievances or future fears. We misinterpret intentions, exaggerate threats, and overlook opportunities for connection or growth. Relationships suffer because we are not present to truly see or hear the other person. Work, creativity, and personal endeavors falter because our attention is divided, our energy scattered. In short, the refusal to release resistance chains the mind to a limited version of reality, one colored by shadows of what was and anxieties about what might be, rather than the richness of what actually is. Learning to let go of this resistance requires both awareness and practice. It begins with noticing when the mind is replaying the past or projecting the future. When you catch yourself resisting, pause and ask, am I here or am I somewhere else in time? Breath and attention anchored in the present moment are powerful tools. Even a simple acknowledgement, this is what is happening now and I can meet it, begins to loosen the grip of resistance. Over time, this practice cultivates a mind that is responsive rather than reactive, grounded rather than scattered, and alive in a way that only presence can provide. The paradox of resistance is that the harder we try to escape the past or control the future, the more trapped we become. The key is to notice without judgment, to step out of the loop and to inhabit the now fully, however uncomfortable or uncertain it may feel. In doing so, we reclaim not just moments, but our energy, our clarity, and our ability to act with wisdom and grace. Life, after all, only exists in the present. Resistance binds us to time that has no power, while presence frees us to experience the reality that is real, immediate, and alive. Life has a remarkable way of teaching lessons, but it does so on its own timeline and in its own language. When we encounter challenges or discomfort, there is always a message hidden within, waiting to be recognized. Yet too often, we resist the lesson, avoid the discomfort, or dismiss the situation as meaningless. We tell ourselves that if we ignore it, it will vanish, that if we distract ourselves enough, we will never have to face it. But what we fail to understand is that life does not allow lessons to be skipped. Whatever we avoid, whatever we refuse to learn, has a way of returning, sometimes in subtle forms, sometimes in forceful ways, until we finally pay attention. This principle can be observed in relationships. When we ignore conflicts, refuse to communicate honestly, or suppress emotions, the underlying issues do not disappear. They return again and again, sometimes as misunderstandings, sometimes as deeper conflicts, until we are finally compelled to confront them. The lesson is often persistent because it holds the key to growth, to emotional maturity, and to healthier connections. Avoidance may bring temporary relief, but it cannot create lasting peace. The unresolved pattern continues to resurface because the universe or life itself is impartial. It does not reward ignorance or avoidance. It only provides repeated opportunities for understanding and transformation. The same is true of personal challenges and internal struggles. Fear, anger, grief, or insecurity that is ignored will return, often in stronger forms. We may push away fear, thinking it will weaken over time, yet it often comes back amplified, appearing in new situations or through new triggers. Anger left unexamined can resurface in unexpected relationships or circumstances, revealing that the lesson of patience, boundaries, or self-awareness was never fully learned. Grief avoided does not dissipate. It manifests in quiet tension, in sleep disturbances, or in emotional reactivity, signaling that we must meet it directly to integrate its wisdom. What life teaches through repetition is that avoidance is not a solution. It is a delay. Every time a lesson returns, it brings with it an opportunity to act differently, to choose differently, and to respond with insight rather than reaction. This cycle is merciful in its own way because it gives us repeated chances to awaken to truths that we might otherwise overlook. The key is not to resist the return, not to resent it, but to recognize it as a teacher patiently guiding us toward growth. Each recurrence carries a hidden invitation to engage with courage, to observe with clarity, and to embrace the discomfort that signals the presence of learning. Ignoring lessons also distorts our understanding of causality. We may look at life and see patterns of misfortune or frustration as random, as if bad luck is punishing us. Yet when we examine closely, we often see that the same patterns, unaddressed behaviors, or unresolved emotions are the root of these recurring difficulties. Life is consistent in showing us the areas that require attention. The lesson ignored is like a bell that keeps ringing until we finally listen. We may try to silence it temporarily through distraction, denial, or busyness, but it always returns louder and more persistent, demanding that we engage with the underlying truth. Even when the lesson returns in new forms, it is connected to what we avoided in the past. A fear of confrontation that was never addressed in one relationship may appear in a professional context years later. A pattern of self-doubt ignored in youth may resurface in adulthood, limiting decisions and possibilities. Life has a remarkable continuity, showing us that avoidance does not erase the lesson. It only postpones the inevitable encounter with it. By noticing the return, by recognizing the familiar pattern, we can begin to respond consciously rather than unconsciously repeating the same mistakes. The practice of facing the lesson as it arises requires mindfulness, patience, and humility. It asks that we stop blaming circumstances or others, that we stop seeing the recurrence as misfortune or injustice, and that we instead see it as a mirror reflecting what has been neglected within ourselves. Each recurrence is a call to awareness, a chance to integrate wisdom, and an invitation to transform our relationship with life. When we finally engage with the lesson directly, without resistance or avoidance, its energy transforms. What once felt heavy, punitive, or painful becomes clear, instructive, and even liberating. In essence, life's lessons are patient. They do not disappear because we refuse to see them. They only return shaped in ways that demand our attention. The ignored lesson is never gone. It waits, persists, and returns until we finally honor its message. Understanding this principle changes the way we approach challenges, emotions, and relationships. Instead of resisting, hiding, or ignoring, we begin to recognize the wisdom in recurrence, the guidance in repetition, and the opportunity in discomfort. The lesson ignored is life's way of saying, there is something here you have not yet understood, and I will continue to show it to you until you do. There is a subtle power in stillness, a quiet force that surpasses effort, struggle, and resistance. Life teaches us repeatedly that pushing harder, striving more intensely, or clenching tighter does not always lead to resolution. Some problems, emotions, and obstacles are not solved through action alone. They are transformed when we stop, breathe, and create space for understanding to arise. Stillness is not inaction. It is an active presence that allows life to unfold without interference, a conscious surrender to the rhythm of reality without giving up personal responsibility or awareness. In the moments of stillness, we can observe clearly, hear deeply, and connect with the subtle currents of energy that guide growth, insight, and healing. When we struggle against discomfort, we often tighten the very grip we wish to release. Anxiety, anger, grief, or fear can feel insurmountable when met with frantic energy or relentless force. The mind believes that to overcome, it must act, resist, or fix. Yet this approach often strengthens the problem instead of dissolving it. Consider a wave crashing against a cliff. The harder it hits, the more turbulent the water becomes, yet the wave cannot be stopped. Only when the ocean allows itself to flow and the water finds its natural path does it eventually settle. Similarly, our internal struggles require a form of yielding, not surrender, but conscious engagement with what is, creating space for transformation rather than battling against reality. Stillness is a state in which observation replaces judgment and acceptance replaces resistance. It allows us to witness the currents of our mind and emotions without being swept away by them. Anger can exist without provoking reactive aggression. Fear can be felt without immobilizing us. Sadness can rise without drowning our spirit. In this space, the intensity of the emotion begins to soften, not because it is denied, but because it is met with calm attention and understanding. The very act of stopping, of being present, disrupts the cycle of struggle that often amplifies suffering. When the mind ceases its relentless pushing and pulling, clarity emerges naturally, and the heart begins to perceive what action, if any, is truly necessary. The practice of stillness is not always comfortable. Our culture trains us to equate movement with progress, noise with productivity, and struggle with strength. Yet in stillness, the mind initially resists, thoughts swirl, discomfort rises, and the temptation to act impulsively appears. But each moment of choosing stillness, each conscious breath, is a reclaiming of inner power. It teaches patience, observation, and discernment. It allows us to recognize patterns that we cannot see in the chaos of struggle. Often the solutions to our problems, the insights about our emotions, and the clarity about our circumstances are revealed only when the mind becomes quiet enough to perceive them. Stillness also creates a resonance with life itself. When we stop forcing outcomes, when we release the compulsion to control, we align with natural rhythms. Problems that once seemed insurmountable begin to shift in unexpected ways. Relationships change not because we manipulate or argue, but because the energy we bring becomes calm, open, and receptive. Decisions that were clouded by tension become clear. Emotions that once dominated our thinking soften, revealing their purpose and their message. There is a profound intelligence in life that operates beyond effort, and stillness allows us to connect with it. Even physical presence is affected by stillness. When the body relaxes, tension dissolves. When the breath flows without obstruction, energy moves freely. The mind, body, and spirit are deeply interconnected, and stillness harmonizes this connection. It is in these quiet, unforced moments that insight arises. We begin to see the difference between what requires action and what requires observation. We recognize that some knots cannot be untied by struggle. They loosen only when we stop pulling and allow awareness to do its work. Stillness, therefore, is a form of mastery. It is not passive resignation, but active engagement with reality as it is. It teaches us that power is not always expressed in force and wisdom is not always found in doing. By cultivating stillness, we create the conditions in which the mind, heart, and spirit can transform what seemed immovable. What once appeared solid, threatening, or impossible begins to shift, not because we have fought harder, but because we have stopped long enough to understand, to observe, and to allow life itself to guide the process. In stillness, struggle loses its grip, and what could not be changed through effort alone begins to dissolve naturally, revealing clarity, freedom, and insight that were always present beneath the surface. In life, the truths we resist, the lessons we avoid, and the discomforts we deny are never truly gone. They remain, quietly shaping our mind, our choices, and our relationships. What we push away grows stronger, not weaker. What we ignore returns, not disappears. Yet, There is a path beyond struggle, beyond resistance, and beyond fear, the path of awareness, attention, acceptance, presence, learning, and stillness. Each of these steps is a doorway guiding us to meet life as it is, rather than as we wish it would be. When we face what arises within us with awareness, we begin to see clearly. When we direct our attention consciously, we release the energy that feeds resistance. When we accept reality without surrendering our agency, we gain strength and clarity. When we step fully into the present, we are liberated from the chains of past and future. When we honor the lessons that return, we awaken to growth and transformation. And when we cultivate stillness, we dissolve what struggle alone cannot. The invitation of this truth is simple yet profound. Stop fighting what is, stop resisting what you fear, and stop ignoring what life repeatedly presents. In the stillness of your attention, in the acceptance of your reality, and in the courage to face what you have avoided, freedom arises naturally. Life flows, lessons unfold, and the weight of resistance begins to lift. What you once resisted no longer controls you. It becomes a guide, a teacher, and a doorway to understanding. To live fully, we must remember that what we resist will remain, but what we meet with clarity, presence, and acceptance can transform. The choice is ours, to continue struggling against the current or to move with it, letting life itself reveal its wisdom. In this choice lies the path to peace, insight, and true freedom.